the Faster Than Light Radio Show.
Welcome once again to the show, and thanks for joining us. I've got a smile on my lips because of some of the disasters that seem to befall radio over the years. One of them occurred in the studios of 6UVS FM last week to Friday listeners of the show, in that the programmer that was working the desk on the particular night played the week before's edition of the Faster Than Light Radio Show. I'm sure a number of you thought with interest, I'd like to go out to wait and see that particular film that's on. And I trust you enjoyed the, again, review of Peter Nichols' new Science in Science Fiction. However, if you went out to wait, you would have been sadly disappointed because all of those films were on the week before. Sorry about that. You won't get a repeat of last week's show this week, I assure you. So you've missed out a review in between. Not to worry, this week's review of Jack Chalker's work, the Well-World Saga, which Penguin is producing, follows in a little while, and it's worth waiting for. Can I just say one or two things before we get round to that, though? One of them deals with the little screen, the television box that sits quietly in the corner most of the year, which tends to churn out some rather interesting science fiction from time to time. We're in a very, very bleak period, unfortunately, at this moment in time. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has just ended. Tears dripped down my face as I did enjoy the show, even though it didn't live up to the expectations I had for it, and didn't really give me the riotous humour that both the books and the radio show had in them. Some things carried off very well, but others were disastrous. Not to worry, I'm sure when we get a repeat there'll be twice as many people watching the television show as there was when the radio show was repeated. Enough of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. However, its departure has left quite a vacuum on the small screen, and that only now means that we've got one thing to look forward to, really, and that's the return of Doctor Who with a new series and, of course, the endless repeats that are to follow. I, for one, always enjoy the new season and the follow-ups of Doctor Who, and I trust you're the same. There's not much in the way of new science fiction material coming out of the studios in the United States or the UK at this moment in time. The US has got The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury coming out in some form or other, and also a series of stories of his set around a carnival, horror-orientated sorts of stories. That's something to look forward to anyway. I've read of late too about the editors of Omni have put together a science package, a science fiction come science fact show, which they have released, and it's now in its second series for American network television. We haven't as yet seen that, and I hope that one of the networks here will pick that up and screen it for us. These are vague hopes. I've heard nothing definite on the grapevine. Not a lot else happening on the way of the small screen, so maybe the best you've got to look forward to is endless repeats of everything that's gone before, and for some of you I'm sure that'll be entertaining. Well, there is the larger screen, of course, but one thing you can do when the little screen gets to be a bit bleak is turn off the box. Ever considered that? You can get back to the actual gut level, the primal form that science fiction was in. You can get back to the printed page. And it does make an interesting evening to sit down, put your feet up, get a cup of coffee or whatever it is you eat or smoke or whatever while you're reading, and read away. Put yourself in a different world altogether. Some good paperbacks out there. I noticed last week in the newsagents that Tom Reamy's book Blind Voices has been released by Penguin. Worth picking up and having a look at. Tom Reamy died quite unexpectedly, and this is probably his last remaining edifice to his talent, and he really did have some talent. I hope to be looking at that book in a future show. Also coming up from Corgi Transworld is the latest of the books of Anne McCaffrey. It's The Crystal Singer, and it's due for release in the very near future, so look out for that as well. There are other good things out there. Comb your shelves by all means and have a look, and of course follow up on the things that you hear about on the Faster Than Light radio show. Well, if you're of the small screens poorly and you haven't got too much money to go to paperbacks because they're up around the $4 to $5 mark currently, you can always whip out to wait and see cheaply some science fiction films. Well, science fiction double feature indeed. And what have we got at wait? Some very, very good ones coming up. This next week is a crackerjack week of the 4th Festival of Science Fiction and Fantasy Cinema. On Saturday, and I really can't go past what's happening on Saturday, they've got two of the worst science fiction films of all time, Plan 9 from Outer Space and Robot Monster, 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock on Saturday. A couple of good doubles coming up, however. Before that, on Thursday and Friday night, are Mad Max and Mad Max 2. They are being paid for as separate programs on this occasion. You'll have to pay for the 7:45 Mad Max and for the 9:45 Mad Max 2, but worth it if you haven't seen them. Australian versions of a rather bleak and very depressing and very savage future on our roads, you might say, battling for oil rights and for petrol and also for a place in the sun. Worth seeing, and certainly very, very good and riveting cinema. Got quite strong reviews worldwide when it came out, most appreciated in Japan and the United States, but has a good following here as well. Becoming something, I suppose, of passé to say good things about Mad Max and Mad Max 2, but worth it. If you haven't seen them, catch up with those. Saturday evening at 7:45 and Sunday again at 1 o'clock is a very, very good value double, Excalibur and Battle Beyond the Stars. Two movies I haven't seen as yet, blush blush, but nevertheless I plan to make amends over this weekend. Excalibur, the John Boorman remake of the King Arthur legend, with a lot more lust and savagery than any other before it, and Battle Beyond the Stars, another remake, this time of Seven Samurai, the Kurosawa movie, and more recently and probably more able to be identified by most Western audiences, would be The Magnificent Seven, a Western using the same idea. Here we have it transported to outer space, one of the actors out of the original Magnificent Seven starring in Battle Beyond the Stars. Battle Beyond the Stars also features a very lovely lady as a Valkyrie. Well, I think I'll look forward to seeing Battle Beyond the Stars. Sunday evening, and again on Monday evening, another very interesting double feature, 2001 A Space Odyssey and Hardware Wars. 2001, of course, is a seminal science fiction movie. Stanley Kubrick teaming up together with Arthur C. Clarke, who made the script line and the storyline, and if you haven't seen it, do see it. It doesn't date so much, but if you have seen it early on, in the late 60s, early 70s when it was first around, then it's a lovely nostalgia trip. If you've never seen it before, then it's a very interesting movie and worth catching up with. Hardware Wars, of course, is that crazy takeoff of Star Wars that ran as a double alongside the Rocky Horror Show in at the Kimberley for years and years and years, and is certainly worth seeing. Egg beaters in outer space, and you'll probably split your sides laughing at Princess Leia's donut bun hairdo affair. On Tuesday night, another double feature in the evening, 7:45, Firefox and Outland, another two very recent science fiction movies and worth catching up with. For the horror freaks, Wednesday night brings us The Exorcist and Altered States. Of those programs coming up then in the near future, I for one wouldn't want to miss the double Excalibur and Battle Beyond the Stars. A really good laugh there is on Saturday at 10 o'clock or 1 o'clock with Plan 9 from Outer Space and Robot Monsters, and there are more besides. The program out at Wait is drawing towards an end, and next Thursday's show I'll be previewing the last 3 or 4 days of screening out there. Get along out there to Wait, have a look at the theatre, very interesting theatre surrounds, and by the end of the sessions now of this particular festival of science fiction and fantasy cinema, you'll probably be able to pick up the programming for the next semester at Wait, which always has some interesting surprises in it and good value films. Catch up with BFC Films then at Wait as the festival draws towards its inevitable climax and close. Here's one science fiction film, or some music from it, that you will be around, I assure you, for a long time to come. For all of you that have seen it, and there have been thousands now in WA, just position this in the movie, Abandoned and Pursued. Well, Steven Spielberg's film, of course, E.T. there, and some music by John Williams, who's done all the music for the film. Very interesting album, if you haven't already got hold of it. Available through Polygram in the state. E.T. the Extraterrestrial, the soundtrack. Abandoned pursued there from the very beginning of the film, and if time permits, I'll play a little bit more from the other side of the album towards the end of the film, at the end of the show. From E.T., a very successful movie, to an author who I believe is going to be a very successful author for a number of reasons. One is he understands a science fiction reader's needs, and I'll come back to that point. And two is he can manage to produce science fiction in a sense that he can continually write. And therefore a lot of his books have poured out since the first one came out in 1976. I think he's chalked up altogether, oh, that was a terrible pun as the man's name is Jack Chalker. I think he's scored a number of novels to date, probably about 8 or 9. His first novel came out in the United States, has not been released in an English edition. It was called A Jungle of Stars, and this is how Lester Del Rey in Analog, the December issue for 1976, reviewed it. Another promising new writer has just appeared. Yet this time his name should be familiar to most of those who've been inside the fan groups for years. He has been mixed up in most of the fields of science fiction, from putting on conventions to publishing some of the better books designed for fans. He has also managed to become a member of First Fandom without being old enough, which is harder than it sounds. His name is Jack L. Chalker, and his first science fiction novel is A Jungle of Stars. Then he then goes on to recount the story of the particular book in between. He says it's a very good first novel and fine promise of another well-known fan to emerge as a first-class pro. Recommended indeed. Jack L. Chalker, in the next year, produced a novel, Midnight at the Well of Souls, which turned out to be the first of a long-range series of Jack's dealing with this particular world universe, Well-World, and it's that I aim to make the subject of the rest of this show. The cryptic comments that Lester Del Rey made about Jack Chalker being a fan and publishing for fans and then getting out and into the world of being a pro himself, I'd like to fill those in for you a little. The cover notes of the book will give you some interesting information. On the flyleaf you'll find out that Jack Chalker was born in Norfolk, Virginia, USA on the 17th of December 1944, and he's lived most of his life since then in Baltimore and Maryland. He learned to read almost from the moment of entering school, and by working odd jobs had amassed a large book collection by the time he was in junior high school. A large collection, too large now for his present quarters, and so he has given what some of it seems to be away. He holds a BS degrees in history and English and an MLA from Johns Hopkins University. He's taught history and geography in the Baltimore public school system, and he now makes his living by being a writer. He has been very involved in the Washington Science Fiction Association from 1958 to date, and he first published a science fiction fanzine called Mirage. This then became the title of his own publishing house, which still exists, which has been put together to publish non-fiction and bibliographical works on science fiction and fantasy. There have been 20 books in the last 9 years, which is when the cover notes were written for the first of the series of Jack L. Chalker Well-World books in the Penguin series. He, I notice from recent books, has only just started talking at great length about relaunching Mirage Press with a heavier program, presumably because these Well-World books are making some money. He has one passion besides science fiction and fandom, and that is ferry boats, and Jack L. Chalker is well known as an authority on ferry boat lore. Now, having said all that about Jack, I'd like to add a few personal comments. I met him in 1975 when he came to Australia for the World Science Fiction Convention held in Melbourne. At the time, I didn't know much of Jack L. Chalker, but I enjoyed his company as a rather ebullient, rather large, as he tends to a little be on the overweight side, very happy, very large mutton chop type sideboards and curly blondish sort of hair, and a very, very strong laugh. Given those sorts of qualities of character, given to talking at parties and holding down stories, one can imagine the sort of rambling, enjoying and jolly sort of writing that Jack manages to put together, and can see the reasons why that is. Jack is first and foremost a storyteller, and the vein of storyteller that he is akin to something of the nature of Jack Vance. He tends to use similar sorts of ideas. The Well-World saga is very, very wide-ranging indeed, and Well-World itself is a planet on which there are numerous, over 1,000 different societies, each one of them living within a hexagram. I'll be giving you more details about the story in just a little while. Jack L. Chalker then, like Vance, likes to postulate a situation in which his protagonists can arrive and where they can be tested against various societies, various norms, and run into all manner of unusual and unlikely aliens. Jack Chalker, more than Jack Vance, likes occasionally to put in rather weak puns and some rather weak jokes. One of the puns in the book in question, Midnight at the Well of Souls, has to deal with one of the alien races that he gets in touch with. He's looking at the characters of the alien race from a hilltop, and he notices that they're very thin. In fact, he comments they're so thin that when they turn side on, you can hardly see them at all. And that reminds me very much of some weak high school jokes of mine. Midnight at the Well of Souls, however, does have a point to it, and the telling of the story comes out very well indeed. It's not just endless parody and endless punning. There is some serious storytelling in there as well. Midnight at the Well of Souls is the first of the Well World saga, of which 3 have been related and published by Penguin to date. The 3 came out almost together towards the end of 1982, and I would suggest that any store that's stocking them, you could get hold of the whole 3 together, and if not, they could always get them in for you. Penguin paperbacks, and well worth looking out for. Peter Goodfellow covers, and you'll notice those almost immediately. Midnight at the Well of Souls has a dinosaur, or a lizard-like creature, sitting on a saddle, riding what appears to be a dolphin across some sand dunes. And it's these sorts of rather incongruous images and these inanities that lead one from looking at the cover of the book to say instantly, what the heck is going on here? And that's exactly what one asks when one dips into Midnight at the Well of Souls. Starts off in a rather standard fashion. We have a group of people, they're researchers, digging up some remains of an ancient world now deserted, long ago called Dalgonia. Now, there seems to have been a Dalgonian massacre at which everybody on the planet seems to have disappeared. But when archaeologists come along later, they find that underneath the planet, at its very inner centre, there is a brain. It appears to be manufactured. It appears still to be operating and keeping the planet intact. And the archaeologists attempt to find out what sort of brain it is. The civilization is known as a Markovian brain, after the man who first found them, Jared Markov, and this brain itself appears still to be pulsating, as do brains on other planets that have been found throughout the known universe. The 2 researchers in question, Skander and Varnet, both of them stagger on the clue to what is actually going on here together, and one of them tries to kill the other. In the process, the one who's got the savage intentions manages to wipe out the research party and pursue his accomplished scientist to the centre of appearing a flat landscape surface which opens up beneath both of them and swallows them up. Indeed, it is a gateway, an entry into Well World. Now, we split here to a spaceship in outer space, upon which we have a group of characters, one of them being Nathan Brazil, a man named Hayne, very terrible character, really, the sort of man that you would hate to meet on a dark night, no scruples whatsoever, only after money, power and position. He has an accomplice, a woman drugged to the eyeballs and being bled to death by Hayne through the drug that he's introduced her to. Rather reads like heroin in today's world, but much, much worse if one can imagine that, named Wu Julie. And so Wu Julie and Hayne, both of them together make up a pair, a bond if you like. And then there is an alien character known as Vardia, who, between the 4 of them on the spaceship, make up a travelling party. They become lured, I think would be the best word, by a beacon, also down onto this planet where they find the ruined and killed party of research scientists, and then track the footprints across to the same flat landscape, and they too are sucked into Well World. Once they get there, all manner of hell breaks loose, and probably the best way to account a little bit of that for you is to let you know what is going on Well World. Well, here we have an indication between Nathan Brazil and Wu Zhu, now somewhat changed, Wu Zhu Li, And he says to her, "Deep beneath our feet is a great machine," he told her seriously. "The Markovian brain is so powerful that it created and maintained the homeworlds as it maintains this one, Wellworld. The brain keeps the equations that sustain all unnaturally created matter, that can undo the fabric of time, space and matter as it created them. Skander wants to change those equations. Not just our lives, but our very existence is at stake." Now that's the game, and that passage from towards the last third of the book is when the game is finally revealed and leads to its inevitable question, its inevitable conclusion, but there are a number of interesting sidelines along the way. One of them has to do with Wu Zhuli, who herself being a drug addict, when she comes to Wellworld she finds that her former strength and her former ability are restored to her in full, as for all characters that come into Wellworld. She has, however, this recurrent incident in trying to set up and accommodate herself to her changed form. Wuju relived the nightmare run for hours, then suddenly woke up. "I must be dreaming," she thought. Everything was fuzzy and she was feeling quite high. She couldn't believe what she saw. She was in a Murney camp, one of the alien races, in the earliest light of dawn, and there were horrible, loud and grotesque snores all around her. Sitting in front of her, arms around its knees, was the biggest Murney she had ever seen, taller than she, and it stood over 2 metres. It was oddly coloured, on the whole a deeper brown than she, laced only here or there with spots of light green that was the usual colour of these strange creatures. From a distance they had looked like walking rectangular bushes, but here, up close, she saw that they had a rough skin that folded and sagged like partially melted plastic all over their body. They looked like a large trunk of a body with no head, she thought. The eyes, huge as dinner plates, were located where the breasts should be, and perhaps 30 centimetres below them was that enormous mouth, a huge slit that almost seemed to cleave the trunk in two. There was no sign of hair, genitals, or for that matter, a nose and ears. The drug, or whatever it seemed to be wearing off more and more. This isn't a dream, she thought suddenly, as fear ran through her. Well, what has happened to this chief of the characters, and who are these strange Murney? I'll leave you to find out when you read the book. But that passage gives you an indication of the way in which Chalker can write, and the way in which he can put together his vision of an alien world. This alien world, as I said before, is very, very vast indeed. There are over 1,500 or 1,700 of these hexes, as they're called, on Wellworld. Wellworld is divided into two halves, and the two halves have organic life forms in the southern half and non-organic life forms in the northern half. Each hex is quite large, the size of a small kingdom, and each hex has its own political form, its own sociological form, its own level of technology and complexity. And it's across various hexes that the protagonists of both parties, a good group and a bad group of course, have to travel until they meet together, midnight, at the Well of Souls. And that is the title of the book. What happens at midnight? What happens to the protagonists? What this series is about and where it is all leading? I'll leave you to find out. I'll let you know, however, that there is more to come, so something survives from this first saga, and the second book, which is divided for the rules of publication into two simply because it would be too large to publish as one volume, is available as books 2 and 3 of the Wellworld saga, already in paperback from Penguin. The whole series is called on the covers a total mega read, and I would say in these days of mega trendies and mega stars, one couldn't get much better than the rather chaotic reading, but very, very driving reading that Jack Chalker offers. Midnight at the Well of Souls has a slow point, possibly the middle passage, but it certainly picks up after that, and it certainly drives at some force towards that middle section. I found that I needed the slowdown and pace to adapt to the relatively fast change of aliens that Chalker served up as we crossed from hex to hex, and I liked it. It was the sort of read where one sat back and enjoyed where the storyteller was taking you. I hope you feel the same way about it when you encounter it. Over the Moon, some more music from the film soundtrack of E.T. And I'm over the moon because we've made it through to the end of yet another show. I've been talking about Jack L. Chalker's new series, The Well World Saga, and the first book indeed, Midnight at the Well of Souls, available as a Penguin paperback for $3.95. And that's all I've got time for this week. Next week I'll catch you with an interesting review, I'm sure. Same station, same time. Until then, goodbye.
Starship, a starship, to take us away, take us away.